Limits of the Flesh, Chapter 71, Fantasy Fiction by Azazyel. Zeoticus and Satan's souls were beyond the Grall's grasp if they still existed at all anymore. As Venelana explained, Zeoticus was not only killed, but he was actually killed via a knife soaked and forged in the soul-scoring rivers of Tartarus that had worn away his soul while I was gone apparently. But not all was in fact lost, as I was able to find Sona Sitri's soul as well as her peerage's souls and thus summon their spectral souls back to the material plane from wherever devil souls ended up after death. I had never in either life seen or heard such a heartfelt cry and scream of relief that Serafall made when she was able to hold Sona's slightly ghostly form in her arms while her peerage was honestly panicking at coming back to life after being slaughtered by Kokabiel. Monet's soul on the other hand was weird. It felt like her soul instead got sent to a whole different afterlife and was the complete opposite of the devils in where I pulled them from. Did the heaven system think you were an angel? I muttered, fucking dumbfounded at the sight of Monet with a small halo over her head. While Clee went over to hug Monet as hard as she could, I made eye contact with Venelana while I held Rias and spoke solemnly. I am sorry, I stated simply. The soul of her son and husband was out of my grasp. I literally couldn't sense them at all, though honestly. I had some hopes that Serafall and the Satans at least got iced to another world with how they got smashed into by Great Red. Venelana merely sadly smiled as she responded. In my long life, I have lost many friends and family. It will take time, but I will mend. I will not break over this, she said, showing her strong inner will. Not to mention she already had a couple of days to process all this while I was busy doing that mission. I looked over to Sona, who despite being a literal ghost, had a red face from how Serafall was squeezing the unlife out of her in her impossible-to-escape hug. Serafall, we need you to go to Ko to retrieve the DNA of Sona and her peerage members, get their hairbrushes, toothbrushes. Use tampon, anything that carries their biological code so I can build new bodies for them to inhabit, I said, and Serafall froze at the thought of letting her Sona go for even a split second. She was clearly mentally warring with herself about the chance of Sona leaving if she were to let go, so I said flatly, Serafall, I can hold up Sona and her peerage's soul so long as they don't do anything strenuous like using magic that I would need to fuel inefficiently. So for a good hour or two I can hold them all without issue, so hurry up, I said, giving her a mental spank to the backside to get going. Okay. I will be back super soon, Sona, you don't move a muscle, you hear? She ordered her little sister before she threw me a look filled with such intense emotions I felt Grafia next to me tense as she took a step forward to break the line of sight, as we could both feel the literal string of sanity that was keeping Serafall together. I had no doubt she would do something regretful if she came back and found out that Sona was gone from this world again. Either way, with Serafall teleporting away to get the materials so I could build Sona and her bodies anew, I refocused on Monet, and Riley smiled seeing how she was already reintegrated back into my creations, with Clee's mop of blonde hair facing me as the elfish girl had already fallen asleep in Monet's chest despite her being a literal ghost. Kiba, let me fix you now, dude, I called out to my bro, and as he made a sword to act as a crutch to walk over, I instead raised a hand and handed over the sleeping form of Rias to Grafia, seeing as Rias had cried herself into a nap, and with my help I enhanced her body's rest, sending her deeper into sleep. Get some actual rest while I worked to fix what I could. Thankfully, Kiba being well alive, I didn't need to do anything else but lay a hand on his hand to map out his body, and I picked out his sacred gear and its strong connection to Kiba as I mapped out his body and took in the hidden damage his body had accumulated during the battle with Kokabiel that took his arm and leg. After a moment of thought, I realized that there wasn't enough leftover biomass in his body to recreate his arm and leg without making him look like something out of a Holocaust survivor. So I did what I should have done to all of Rias's peerage and just gave him the Phoenix bloodline, so as his own magical energy flared into life, the devil bloodline filled his body with power and flames grew from the stumps of his lost limbs, with said limbs restoring themselves within moments as the bloodline did its duty in restoring its host to its peak form. You never really feel grateful for having both of your hands until you realize how everything from eating and reading takes almost two hands unless you let everything you do relax or be mounted somewhere, Kiba said in wonder as he experimentally clasped his new hand together with an ecstatic smile as a soft chuckle escaped him at having his arm and leg restored, while I looked over at Sona, who was clearly comforting her peerage, who thankfully wasn't panicking anymore, with all their past friends or distant friends at least being around with a clear path to coming back to life being outlined for them. I smiled as Kiba gave me a quick side bro hug and I clapped his back with a couple of solid thumps before we separated. Looking around, I didn't see any other issues with anyone else, so I looked back to Venelana and Grafia, who were quietly speaking in a corner of the room. So, not sure what Sirzex told you guys, but he set me up, I said wryly as the lady's eyes snapped to me, with Grafia smiling wryly as she looked between me and Artemis, who had moved over to me and took my arm as I went back over to relax on the couch with Rias's sleeping form held in my lap. Venelana rolled her eyes and spoke dully. Jake, arranged marriages are very much a thing in devil culture, remember. Rias already knows and has come to accept Artemis, though she said quite fiercely that she would never sleep with you again. If she wasn't the head wife, just as I was the head wife and manager of my husband's harem. She said with a soft smile, in memory of that scene probably. I felt Artemis's grip on my arm tighten momentarily before she hummed and then spoke out. I won't contest that claim. Being the mistress works for my desire and having some more autonomy, and frankly, such a position will help me avoid the Hera reaction to seeing my man sleeping with another woman. Artemis answered Venelana's unanswered question as to what kind of status the goddess would have within the Gremory clan and truthfully my family. I took a breath and Artemis took that moment to slide onto the couch beside me at an angle so I could rest my head on her huge soft breasts. So as I cradled Rias in my arm, Artemis made me the meat in the sandwich as she held me while I relaxed. Even as I relaxed I heard, and as I opened my eyes I saw Grafia shift on the couch across from me, and as my eyes landed on her she spoke quietly. Jake, when you are done with making new bodies for Sona Sitri and her peerage, as a man, can I ask that you to speak with my son Milikas? He has been inconsolable with all that has happened recently. Grafia said with some shame in her voice at being unable to help. I winced at the thought of my nephew basically and how he has been handling all this. So I nodded to Grafia and spoke softly. I will do that as soon as I finish with Sona and her peerage, I promised her, and then I closed my eyes to relax into the bosom of Artemis as my creations silently surrounded me and gently took hold. Oh no, my arms were just leaned their heads into my side to remind themselves I was still around.